The research will look at the effects of cultural immersion abroad on North Carolina science teachers and their classroom practices and student interactions. In North Carolina and around the world, we have to prepare students to be globally competent individuals. We no longer live in a world where cities and cultures are self-reliant, but we live in a world in which we are interconnected. North Carolina has been a leader in global competence and continue to be a leader in global competence. In 2013, the State Board of Education commissioned a task force to look at global education in North Carolina. One of the components that they realized in global education in North Carolina is that to prepare our students for the world, we need to prepare their teachers. Even though that is a great concept and we want to reach every student, North Carolina has not been able to abide by that and show measurements of growth. Teachers are the ones who instill the global competence. They're correct. So there should be professional development opportunities for teachers to learn and to grow better in cultural and global competence. The focus that they have decided to put on is the pre-service teachers in the college and university system. It is leaving out veteran teachers that are in the classroom, boots on the ground, working with students. The purpose of this research is exploratory, and it wants to explore the influences of cultural immersion. There's a gap in the literature. The gap in the literature is on in-service teachers and their role in cultural immersion. The focus has been primarily put on, the research focus concentrates on pre-service teachers in the role of cultural immersion in their studies. What it deems to lack in the research by not focusing on the in-service teachers is that what happens when it's implemented in the classroom. Cultural immersion research says conducted on in-service teachers does not demonstrate that and how their experiences are when they return. So the current research needs to focus more on the implications for classroom teachers. America is one of the most diverse countries in the world, and the classroom is where it reflects that. Some teachers see that there is a disparity between the culture, the world's culture, and the culture they see in the classroom. Some teachers are not bothered by that and they're ready to lead, but others are ready to step aside because they feel that an uncomfortableness with teaching in a multicultural classroom. This uncomfortableness affects how a teacher teaches and also where the teacher teaches. There are two types of cultural immersion. Normally, we concern ourselves with the cultural immersion abroad. That's the one we focus on. That is the one that is most memorable. However, there is domestic cultural immersion. And the difference is the insider-outsider basic feel. With your domestic cultural immersion, you're stepping outside of your neighborhood, your comfort zone, to step into someone else's area temporarily. So, for example, if I was of the Catholic religion and I decided to culturally immerse myself in the Jewish culture, go to church, go to the restaurants, be in the customs, but come to my own bed at night, that's just domestic immersion. Abroad immersion is actually stepping out, taking days to be immersed into, for example, another country. Now, both of these immersions have positive impacts on the cultural competence and global competence of teachers. However, being an outsider, that abroad cultural immersion has a more significant effect on teachers. The theoretical framework for this is Hanvey's Attainable Global Perspective. Okay. Hanvey understood that in the 1970s of his time that things were changing. The world was starting to become more interconnected in ways of economics and environment. And the goal that he wanted for his Attainable global perspective is he wanted in some measure to contribute to the formation of a global perspective in which young people in the U.S. might actually be able to acquire in the course of their formal and informal education. So he wanted them to be able to build a foundation of understanding what is happening in their world. So his focus, he knew that the school was where he had to be. So his primary focused audience were teachers at the time. Hanvey's framework has 5 dimensions. One is perspective consciousness, and this is the awareness that one's thoughts and actions and beliefs are not universally shared by others. The second awareness is the state of the planet. And the state of the planet awareness is the ode to the conditions in which one treats the planet, as well as how they concern themselves with issues that affect the health of that planet. The next one is cross-cultural awareness. Now, Hanvey says this is the hardest one to obtain. This awareness demonstrates the example of diversity of humanity and how these differences compare to one another. Knowledge of global dynamics is the awareness of the interconnectedness of the world. The dimension focuses on the process of change and growth. Lastly is the awareness of human choice. This is the awareness of the conflict and the choices of humanity. In some occasions, the solution brings on more problems. Hanvey believes that everyone holds these awarenesses. They're just held at different degrees. The methodology is taking a case study approach. It is concentrated on the It is concentrated on the bounded theory of a single instrument case study. So it's inquiring about the focuses of one issue. The participants are all secondary science teachers. There are 4 participants in this research study. 3 of them are from rural areas or teach in rural areas, are white, have been out of the country before, either on vacation or mission trips. 1 participant is black, teaches in the urban school district, and has never been out of the country before. The instrument that is being used is the modified MyCap. The MyCap is a 40-question assessment. 32 of the questions are quantitative and 8 of the questions are qualitative. But we're using a modified version and concentrating only on the qualitative data. The data will be analyzed by the researcher, broken down into codes, and those codes will be emergent codes because this is exploratory research. For trustworthiness, the researcher requested information from Dr. Meredith Henderson, who is from Go Global NC, and they shared an internal not-for-publication document about the trip, evaluations from the participants on the day-to-day, their implementations in the classroom. Their document was mainly for funders. There are some limitations. One is the sample size. There are only 4 participants, and the researcher happens to be one of the participants in the study. Now, a little bit more about the instrument being used. The MyCap has 4 dimensions, and as stated before, it has 40 questions. Each dimension has 10 questions and 8 quantitative to qualitative, and we're concentrating on the qualitative ones. This instrument was actually developed from Hanvey's Attainable Global Perspective. There were 4 themes and findings that came from the research. One is teachers' understanding of the importance of an interconnected world. The second one is the incorporation of cultural awareness and how the teachers incorporated that. The third finding was teachers understanding biases and their potential for biases. And, that was also related to teachers' cultural identity. And the 4th and final one was the importance of building relationships with students. So with an interconnected world, they're broken down pre-immersion and post-immersion. That could also be related to pre-assessment, post-assessment as well. So noticing in the pre-immersion of the interconnected world, the finding for this particular one was that cultural immersion encouraged teachers to promote the need for students to understand the interconnected world. So as we look at the first pre-immersion and try to understand, they were trying to connect and knew that there needed to be an awareness that students needed to have in understanding the world around them. Post-immersion, we noticed a change in voice, and that change in voice became more of an advocate type. And in post-emergent, they were saying, yes, my students are fairly sheltered from global events. Without learning about these things in school, many of my students will never have the opportunity to learn these. In incorporating culture, pre-immersion, they were asked how are they planning to incorporate it, and they had some general ideas, and they were very general in nature. But when it came to post-immersion, they were very specific and had a frame of reference in which they could share this information with their students and felt comfortable doing so. So there was a shift there, noticing in specifically how they would incorporate that to the classroom. Teachers' cultural identity, and this is identification of biases as spoken earlier, this one was a very interesting one because in pre-immersion and post-immersion, they were the same thing, basically. So they cross-referenced each other. One participant put one thing in pre, but then another participant would notice it in post. So what this basically came as a teacher's culture affects the way they teach and the cultural norms that they expect their students to have. And they're following those traditions. And this could be an unconscious bias toward student behavior and not just behavior, but expectations as well, and that teachers are always going to revert back to where they are comfortable in their traditional setting. Building relationships. In pre-immersion, we noticed that there was a concentration of teachers who were concerned primarily on their basic students' academic needs. But in post-immersion, when it came to wondering about their students and how they interact with them, they were making actual steps and determining that they're all going to build relationships. That was a common thing for them, not from transitioning from pre-immersion to post-immersion, that every response incorporated building relationships. So what does this mean? Okay. Most don't travel far from home. So the school is going to be the only place where it can be consistent cultural and global competencies being met. Teachers who have tools in their toolbox feel more, and a frame of reference to go with it, will feel more comfortable spreading information to their students. And teachers have learned to recognize and overcome some of their own biases. Now, what is this implication for stakeholders? This means that pre-service institutions need to continue their focus on cultural immersion with their teachers so they can bring out that generation ready for the workforce. But it also means for school systems that there is a need for cultural immersion in the school system and global competence training to continue for these teachers, the veteran teachers who have been there, because they have, after so many years themselves, their own biases. And government and business needs to step up as well. And there needs to be funding, whether it's co-funding, whether businesses want to use their tax-deductible donations, some money set aside by the government to ensure that cultural awareness and cultural immersion is an option for teachers. If businesses want a global ready workforce, they need to contribute early. So there's still more future research, and there's future research primarily because there was a small sample size, and we want to continue to show North Carolina the benefits that their teachers can have by being a part of a global ready workforce. If we want our students to model, we want our students to have competencies, we must prepare them, and the teachers must feel comfortable doing so. So that's very important too for teachers to model.